It's that time again. A new ban list means new top deck lists. I've stated before that I'm not a fan of doing a list of the top 10 decks of the new format unless one can look at the ban list and be confident that a significant shift in the meta has occurred. Looking at the most recent ban list, there should be no confidence in a shift in the meta. The meta will shift with the release of ABCs in October and Invasion Vengeance in November, but even then the best decks are rather predictable, either looking at the present or the near future leading up to the next ban list. With that said, instead of another top 10 best deck lists out there for consumption, either now or looking at the meta after Vengeance, I'm going to do what I typically do. Put together a list of top 10 non-meta or rogue decks for this current format. First, this list is comprised of my analysis of how a particular deck competes against the top tier decks in the format, in addition to the better secondary option, and finally, as a form of tiebreaker of sorts, how the decks compete against each other. For the purpose of this list, tier 1 decks were thought to be Blue Eyes, PK Fire, Cosmos, Metaphos Yang Zings, and tier 1.5 decks were thought to be Satellar Knights, despite the dearth in its play for some mysterious reason and still a very high quality deck, Mermail, Cliffort Demise, any Magispector Performapal Pendulum combination, Monarchs, and Masked Heroes. Did I just do a top 10 list? That was rather easy. Much easier than making or ordering this list. Interestingly, there is a lot of movement on this list relative to the last list, thanks to changes in general meta strategy and the release of a number of new archetypes. Understand that, while most of the analysis was focused on the next 2 months, these choices for the list would not change even after Vengeance is released. In my opinion, while ABC and Frogs featuring Treetoad would replace Magispector Performapal and Clifford Demise in the analysis, this change is not significant enough to change the overall performance ability of the decks against the meta relative to the current existing meta, outside of maybe one, which I'll talk about in the comment section. So, with that said, let's get started. Number 10. Cyber Angels. One of the most hyped decks of the year when it made the rounds on the internet after its release in the OCG, the hype died down quite considerably to the point where a number of people did not even register its general release in Dragons of Legend Unleashed. However, with the top 32 at Rimini, and numerous famous Yu-Gi-Oh! Commenters talking about how good the deck is, along with access to the rather broken Herald of Perfection, the hype train is chugging away full speed ahead, and it even had to add a bunch of extra cars for everyone else to jump on it. Welcome to the party, Cyber Angels. I wonder if I really should be calling this deck Cyber Angels, or should I be calling it Herald of Perfection featuring Superstar Tribute Monster Ben 10? For a number of builds that some people are hyping only run one type of Cyber Angel, the aforementioned Ben 10. Overall, with the right design, the deck is rather consistent, although it's not as consistent as I think some want to believe, and can be explosive, putting a Herald on the field with multiple fairies in hand, along with either a high-value XZ monster from a Star Seraph Scepter Sovereignty combination, or even Christia, making it a nightmare for an unprepared opponent. Ah, but there's the rub. That's why side decks exist. The two biggest weaknesses of Cyber Angels, or Herald of Perfection featuring Superstar Tribute Monster Ben 10, are first, they're rather easy to side against because the current popular builds have to resort to basically extra deck monsters, or the few that run Regeki, to get over anything not as a result of battle. Thus, it lacks utility against monsters that cannot be destroyed by battle. Also, start adding those Kaijus, Breakthrough Skills, Curse Seal the Forbidden Spell, Naturia Beasts, and Mask of Strix or Fog Kings, and wish your opponent who is running Cyber Angels luck, because he or she will need it. The only reason this deck did so well at Rimini, in my opinion, is no one saw it coming. Thus, side deck options to combat it were few, if any at all. The second big weakness is this deck has significant problems getting over an established board. Thus, if it bricks, it can almost never recover, or if it goes second, it could be up against it rather quickly. However, Herald of Perfection decks have always been like that. Regardless of any future success beyond Rimini, this deck is certainly going to be popping up in the meta, and more than likely be a pain in the neck for most players. Number 9. Lunalight. With the current state of the meta and the lack of Crimson Fox, Lunalights find themselves here at number 9, rather than a little higher up on the food chain. The strengths of Lunalight monsters play well to the general strategy of the deck, with advantage generators in Sheep, Rabbit, and Tiger, setting up fusion plays in addition to Rabbit's quasi-giant Trunade effect, temporarily eliminating back row threats, allowing you to get your attacks in, Wolf's piercing and secondary fusion support, and Miss Coup de Grace herself, Blue Cat. Supported by both Tenki as a searcher and their own personal high-quality revival card in Lunalight Perfume, the deck, despite being fusion-centric, is rarely lacking for resources after making a fusion play. From a defensive standpoint, both Blue Cat and Cat Dancer protect the field well enough. Ironically, the major failing of the deck may be the reliance of the fusion monsters not named Leo Dancer on Blue Cat, for both Cat and Panther Dancer can have trouble against some of the bigger fields that an opponent can put together. Also, similar to most Cyber Angel builds, most Lunalight builds have trouble getting through monsters that have battle destruction immunity or even resistance. Finally, while Lunalights have a quality grind game, their speed game is a little lacking, especially when it comes to actually OTKing, for both Cat and Panther at least need multiple monsters to beat up. Maybe they can get by with just one if they've been powered up by Blue Cat. Number 8. Fluffle. Fluffles get the nod over Lunalights because of their higher levels of versatility and speed. In a properly designed Fluffle deck, it's not difficult to go another 5-7 cards deep in the deck, largely thanks to Wings, and set yourself up for another 4 to 6 more cards next turn, thanks to the second Wings. Its high-power field destruction, in the form of Tiger with strike sidestepping via Cat or Rabbit, may give some players flashbacks to Dragonfly and Hornet teaming up. Fright for Sheep is available to control the field and manage opponent floaters, where Wolf can commonly attack at least 3 times, typically ending the duel right there. Finally, in combination with Instant Fusion, Sabretooth is ridiculously easy to summon and can tag with Tiger and or Sheep to attack over huge threats like Ultimate Falcons and Attack Mode Dora, and Sabretooth can also maintain strong field presence. Fluffles can even shrug off a random Curse Seal the Forbidden Spell better than most polymerization fusion-centric deck due to the existence of Fright for Fusion. With speed through draw power and searching, versatility through extra deck monster effects and fusion recursion, and power through card destruction and various attack increasing attributes, why are Fluffles sitting down here at number 8? Well, the one glaring issue is that, despite the availability of 2 separate common fusion cards for the deck, Fluffles are still a fusion deck. Get unlucky and don't see a means to fuse for the first couple turns, and it will be incredibly hard to come back, for the main deck monsters typically cannot hold their own against the meta. Also, the deck has trouble against PK Fire, thanks to all of the floating, Sheep can only do so much, and those pesky Fog Blades. Number 7. Speedroid. The biggest advantage Speedroids have overall are its speed, haha, thanks to Terratop and Taketomborg, and significant levels of recursion, including what might be the best archetype-specific recursion card in the game in Speed Recovery, sorry Lunalight Perfume, due to both its recursion and then costless return to the hand effect, which can set up numerous chains of advantage through either effect. If nothing is preventing extra deck summoning, and you cannot special summon a synchro monster from the extra deck every turn, then you've either drawn horribly, or your deck is poorly designed. Tie into that speed and general consistency the power of Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon with its ability to negate a monster effect once per turn, and being almost impossible to kill by battle without significant card effect help, and the deck definitely has sufficient power to get the job done, and this is one of those decks where Crystal Wing is ridiculously easy to put on the field. In addition to Crystal Wing, Speedroids have a number of other removal options from the deck to stymie and generally annoy the opponent, especially that nearly immortal Hagoita. However, the synchro capacity of Speedroids is the double-edged sword, for they are completely dependent on those synchros. In a sense, Speedroids are the synchro version of Fluffles. Huge extra deck potential, but the main deck is pretty much entirely designed to support that extra deck summoning, not engage on the field in any real level. With a sea of Solemns to navigate, as well as a second Thunder King possibly rearing its no-searching summons negation head once again, establishing a board with Speedroids can be difficult at times. Overall, though, the positives certainly outweigh the extra deck reliance of Speedroid, and as I like to say, good deck design mitigates a portion of this weakness. Number 6. Blank? Let me take a moment to set the stage for this deck. Look, I acknowledge that people are not going to like this choice, because most people do not like this deck, period. Heck, they don't like the genre. But before the chorus of boos rains down, understand that it cannot be denied. This deck is in an incredibly competitive position right now, both in the current and future meta, regardless of, for whatever reason, it being MIA. The deck? Chainburn. Overall, I have no idea why Chainburn has yet to rear its ugly head in the competitive meta, lying in almost a hibernated state of sorts. Maybe a vast majority of players either do not know how good Chainburn is in the current meta, or simply refuse to play Chainburn out of some moral principle that I can certainly understand. That's why I don't play it, golden rule and all. If I don't do unto Chainburn to you, you will not do unto Chainburn to me. However, if this list is going to be meaningful and accurate, it must acknowledge the advantages of Chainburn. In a meta where speed kills, making the so-called unbreakable board is the goal, and victory pretty much comes from inflicting battle damage, these are things that Chainburn could really just care less about. Chainburn does not care about any solemn card. Chainburn laughs at your floodgates not named Royal Decree. Kaijus are irrelevant. Negators like Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon and summoning funnels like Ultimaya are even more irrelevant. Floaters, anti-destruction, and or targeting monsters. What? Chainburn worry? Nah. The simple fact is that these so-called unbreakable or high advantage boards commonly leave Chainburn yawning before it releases a torrent of effect damage while hiding behind Wabakus, threatening roars, the occasional breakthrough skill and battle immune monster, and a seemingly endless supply of tokens. In some sense, Chainburn can be regarded as a judo deck, in that the bigger the board, i.e. the force that one applies in an attempt to defeat the Chainburn user, the greater the likelihood that Chainburn wins. Some may argue that Chainburn is not fast enough to keep up with the current meta. In the past, that argument held more water, but now, I don't think so. With cards like Card of Demise, Accumulative Fortune, Pot of Duality, Balance of Judgment, Reckless Greed, etc., there are plenty of draw options for Chainburn to help speed through the deck to get those Battle Negator and Burn cards. Properly designed Chainburn decks are more consistent now than ever before. The only real main deck threat is the opponent setting Twin Twisters and then hoping for the best by breaking your cards before you can chain them. So why is Chainburn not number 1? Chainburn does have its share of natural enemies that can hide in the side deck. Certain members of the Performa Mage family, like Hat Tricker and Trapeze Magician, do quite a significant job at neutralizing Chainburn. With all due respect to Yubel, Danko Seka is Chainburn's ultimate nightmare, and even a new threat in Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon, which looks at defense position tokens and declares, "This is gonna be sweet." If Chainburn ever really took off, these side deck options would be available to put out some of the fire. At least one would hope. Number 5. Dino Mist. The first Pendulum-based deck joins the list. So what do Dino Mists have going for it? As a Pendulum deck, it has inherent grind and swarming advantages. As Water Machine Pendulums, they have access to some very high-quality Synchro and XZ monsters that can create significant advantage and versatility. Its main deck monsters also have some very nasty effects, ranging from direct attacking, spinning cards from the hand or field, swarming from the hand without using Pendulum Summoning, opponent attack reduction, deck searching, and banishing upon destruction by battle. Their Pendulum effects help maintain field presence and advantage, and tie that into their archetype-specific Searcher and Recycler, Dino Mist Charge. It can be a pain in the neck to keep their scales down for the count. Wow, it seems like Dino Mists check off a lot of the boxes. So why are Dino Mists MIA in the competitive scene? Well, they certainly do check off a lot of boxes, but it does not seem to check off the box most players think is the most important in the current play environment: speed. Dino Mist is a Pendulum deck, but it does not have a monster like Performapal Pendulum Sorcerer or Luster Pendulum or a card like Draco Face-Off, nor a general mechanic like Ignites or Metaphors to rapidly dump targets into the extra deck to maximize the strength of the Pendulum mechanic and help you set up boards very early in the game. Some players have tried to integrate the Pendulum Sorcerer, searching mechanics, and Draco cards to amplify speed, but most players just seem to pass on Dino Mists. Maybe a little too abruptly. Number 4. Evil Swarm. Overall, there's not much to discuss here beyond get Ophion on the field, going first, and it's going to be very hard sledding for a number of meta decks, for Ophion can be an utter pain to get over, thanks to its anti-kaiju standing and ability to search spell and trap protection through Infestation Pandemic. However, go second and view the opponent's established board in horror, and the sledding gets rather difficult for the Evil Swarm player. I think Evil Swarm will probably need to join up with a Phantom Knight hybridization in a sense to really excel against the meta, though, because while Ophion can do some significant damage to decks like Blue Eyes, Metaphos, Yang Zing, Cosmos, it does almost nothing against PK Fire, Monarchs, and Satellar Knights, even when it goes first. Thus, the success of Evil Swarm going forward is to develop a strategy for managing these Ophion is worthless decks. Phantom Knights seem to be the best hybrid option for managing these other threats, as well as maintaining some effective speed for Ophion, especially when they get their rank up spell. Overall, Evil Swarms are not a complicated deck, but it could be higher or lower on this list depending on exactly what decks decide to run the meta over the next few months. One of the major reasons Evil Swarm even made this list is the general belief that Blue Eyes will be a major player in the meta over the next few months. Otherwise, its bad PK Fire matchup might have sunk it like it did on my last list. Number 3. Despot. The strengths of Despots have not changed that much since the release of 009. Strong and consistent swarming with the ability to concentrate damage into a single strike, allowing them to attack over almost any monster that can be destroyed by battle. Heck, 004 is a one-monster battle wrecking crew all by its little self. Smart design and playmaking from the deck can force the opponent to rely pretty much exclusively on mass scale removal to actually dislodge the board, which can then only be rebuilt by a normal summon 003 or just putting a 004 normal summoned or special summoned onto the field. This is one of the key advantages that I think some people forget about Despots, is that in the right build, it has the ability to put together a meaningful board while retaining significant recovery if something goes sideways. Cough, Regeki, cough. Another nice thing about Despots, similar to Batterymen, which just missed this list, is that the inherent advantage skeleton is small, ranging from 16 to 20 cards. Thus, about half of your deck can be crafted in any way the player desires, giving it certain advantages against certain matchups. However, despite this flexibility in deck design, Despots do suffer from one inherent problem: the dependency on 003 or 004 to start and maintain the engine. This dependency can produce meaningful levels of inconsistency. Fortunately, depending on the type of deck design, this dependency can be managed rather effectively thanks to a significant level of generic support that can be added to the deck. Number 2. Shiranui. One of the most important advantages of Shiranui over various other archetypes is its level of versatility. It can significantly and consistently advance its play via monster effect, spell effect, or trap effect. The level of extra deck versatility in swarming is one of the best in the game and rivals a deck like Speedroids or even Synchron in its capacity to spit out powerful extra deck monsters every turn. The expansion of Gold Sarcophagus to 3 provides even more flexibility for the deck. Also, the deck produces consistent levels of field presence over a multiple number of turns with the multiple levels of recursions. The ability to both access either First of the Dragons and Draco Necro Nethersoul Dragon, depending on exactly how you want to build your Shiranui deck, also opens the doors to more avenues for advantage and victory. Shiranui is also one of the few decks that can make multiple Psyframe Lord Omegas in a single turn without being specifically designed to do so, giving the deck overall an opponent resource reduction advantage as well. Incidentally, Shiranui is one of those decks that, if they were given one more good either level 4 Shiranui monster, or even just a rank 4 zombie monster, they'd very easily jump to tier 1.5, maybe even tier 1. Overall, it's difficult for the opponent to make a board that a properly designed Shiranui deck cannot break if they drew decently. The major weakness for Shiranui is that it commonly takes them a turn to set up when they don't open Solitaire, but most of the time that is not a significant issue. Finally, I suppose that with all of the changes on this list, both to the decks themselves and the positions that some had on the last list relative to this list, it is fitting that one thing remains the same. Hail to the Queen, baby. Number 1, Madolche. Queen Tiramisu is and probably will always be one of the top 10 cards in the game, for it can remove any card from the field that is affected by monster effect or cannot negate monster effects. Summoning her is rather straightforward and basically has a positive feedback structure, almost similar to Despot's, where one queen will commonly set up the hand for another queen next turn, which can keep the pressure squarely on the opponent, knowing that even if I get rid of the current queen, I have to now game plan for another queen hitting the field during the next turn. Even when facing an opponent that can manage Tiramisu, deck space in the typical Madolche deck is flexible enough that contingencies can be utilized to manage those specific troublemakers that do not respect the authority of the queen. Not surprisingly, though, the biggest weakness of Madolche is the dependency on the queen, and the fact that she is vulnerable to a card like Ghost Reaper. Fortunately, due to the general speed of the deck, other extra deck monsters can be used to partially cover when the queen is not available. Overall, though, I think one of the reasons we don't see Madolche's presence, its World's appearance notwithstanding, in the meta more often is I don't think people play Madolche decks as efficiently as they could. From my perspective, Madolches need to be played defensively, with the queen and her subjects counterpunching, but this defensive strategy is not typically accomplished when running Brilliant Fusion or some form of Pendulum engine. However, regardless of whether my opinion on this efficiency construct of the Madolche build is accurate or not, the simple fact is that Madolche is a very powerful deck that should see a lot more competitive play and success. And for whatever reason, it doesn't. For those wondering where deck X is, I think deck Y is a great deck. Why wasn't it on this list? Maybe it got close to getting on the list. I've listed a number of other decks that were close in my first comment below. Well, that is my top 10 list of best and most competitive rogue decks in the current meta. Thank you for your attention and your time. I'm out.